Hello, one and all. Welcome to Lemon Live at 5. So happy that you could be here. So I would hope that it's not too hyperbolic what we have here, meaning they could go to jail. Sorry about that. I'm listening to it on YouTube and on our live feed. They could go to jail because they could. Now, whether they will or not, that's a whole different question. So thank you for joining us. Where are you streaming from? Let us know. We're glad that you're here again. Make sure you hit the thumbs up and like. It affects the algorithm. More people will get to see this conversation, hear this conversation, and also get to meet my guest, which I know you're going to love. And I know, he brings the heat. And it's also, he's a younger person who is dealing with politics and trying to get younger people involved in politics and to understand politics. So once again, thank you for joining us. Did Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg hack? Which is strange. Now, how could he hack that? I thought that, Signal was unhackable. Okay. Did he hack his way into a federal government chat group? That's the question. Obviously, they should not have been using this. No, obviously he didn't. But that is what the president, Donald Trump, is suggesting now. They're trying to figure out every way to suggest that Jeffrey Goldberg is a bad person. They're trying to sully his name. They're criticizing him. They're demonizing him. They're saying he's a bad person. Oh my God, he's done this. He's done that. He hates us or whatever. He's a never Trumper. Why are they doing this? Because he knows that in reality, just about his entire cabinet could, in the sane world, they could go to prison. That's not hyperbole there for that Signal group chat scandal. Mike Walls, who's the person who added everyone, National Security Advisor, prison. J.D. Vance, Vice President, prison. Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, prison. Tulsi Gabbard, prison. So we'll see. They are really in deep shit. And they're trying to do anything that they can to distract us. So to quote my friend Aaron Rupar, it is like Watergate, only in this version, Nixon directly mails a tape to Woodward and Bernstein. Again, not hyperbole. So joining me now, voiceover at the Bulwark, and I'm so glad again that he's here. Cam Kasky is a co-host of the Bulwark's FY Pod. He also helped organize March for Our Lives back in 2018. Cam, thank you for joining us. I'm so glad that you're here. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm not in prison like these people might be, but seeing as sometimes I say negative things about President Trump, it could be any day now. So I'm enjoying freedom.
So is FY what we think it is?
Yeah, FY stands for For You. It's the For You pod because FYP is For You page. I absolutely hate the title. I did everything I could to stand up against it because I didn't even know what a For You page was. And I'm the type of Gen Z that they're going for. But it is what it is. And it's really confusing. But we have a great time over there. We have a lot of conversations with very interesting people in my generation, which is a generation that people are really trying to figure out, seeing as we're exhibiting some pretty interesting behaviors these days.
All right, I got the For You part. I thought could be for something else, an F you, but we'll see.
or forget you, depending on if it's the clean version.
Cam, do you think I'm being hyperbolic about these folks should go to jail? Because everyone I've spoken to said they should, and in a normal world, perhaps they would.
No, for sure. I think that if Joe Biden was the president right now, or if really almost anybody except for Donald Trump was the president right now, these people would very likely go to prison or at least face some sort of consequences. But as you said earlier, this is all about shifting the blame. This is about suggesting that this guy from the Atlantic just decided to hack their war plans group chat. And I don't see anybody facing any sort of consequences under the Trump administration. Again, Joe Biden probably would have. Kamala Harris probably would have. I don't think Trump is going to do anything other than spread some random conspiracy theories as to how this guy could have gotten in.
Okay, so let's get our way through the day and get people caught up on this. I was surprised yesterday. We were surprised yesterday and this morning. There were people who had not heard about this, but I think it's finally rippling through the country, and it's going to have some repercussions. Again, whether they, whatever they face is I really believe, going to be up to the president, since he, controls the Supreme Court and somewhat, et cetera. Okay, so I'm wondering, are they going to make changes? And that is one of the questions that the president was asked today as he was taking questions. And I'm not sure if it was an impromptu press briefing or if they were just allowing folks into the White House, into the Oval Office. But this is his answer. Watch.
Mr. President, are you going to change any of the practices that your national security officials used after a reporter was inadvertently added to a group chat about attacks on Yemen?
Well, I think it's a question I've been asked now, and I've given a few answers, and they've all been the same. We have an amazing group. Our national security now is stronger than it's ever been. We have had a very, very successful, numerous attacks on that area. These are people that shoot down ships, not only our ships, ships all over the world. They're shooting down right out of the water and damaging them badly, or they're going down. They're also shooting anything that happens to be flying in the area. We hit them very, very hard. There was no classified information, as I understand it. They used a app, if you want to call it an app, that a lot of people use, a lot of people in government use, a lot of people in the media use. And I think I'll ask Mike. Mike is here. Do you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, Mr. President. You asked about lessons. I think there's a lot of journalists in this city who have made big names for themselves, making up lies about this president, whether it's the Russia hoax or making up lies about Gold Star families. And this one in particular, I've never met, don't know, never communicated with, and we are looking into and reviewing how the heck he got into this room.
Interesting. How the heck he got into this room. Didn't the person who is sitting there answering the question let them or invite him into the room?
You know, you think about Hanlon's razor, the idea that you should not attribute to malice what can be attributed to stupidity. I personally think this is sort of a double Hanlon's razor, where no matter what it is, it should be attributed to either malice or stupidity. I'd like to think this was probably a stupidity, because if it was malice, if they added this guy to the group chat in some sort of shady move, they would be boasting it, right? Every time this new Trump administration seems to do something that is violent and terrible and wrong, they're pretty happy to come out and tell us and say, yeah, we're doing something terrible, violent, and wrong. LOL. Here's the guy who runs the administration doing a Hitler salute. Enjoy. So this seems like a big case of stupidity. Somebody clearly made a mistake, and that's why they are rushing so aggressively to cover it up and kind of tripping over themselves while they do. So, but again, you know, I don't see any consequences. I'm sure the administration will do something or say something extremely inflammatory within the next few hours just to try and divert attention. That seems like what this administration is doing right now, is doing something terrible, doing something inexcusable, and making sure that they do something inflammatory to get people talking, so they sort of look away from what's actually going on.
Yeah. So listen, here's the thing. He is saying, well, you know, the Russia investigation, they're bringing back all the oldies. And when Pete Hegseth was asked about it yesterday, the same sort of talking point. So it looks like they're all on the same page, and they've come up with an answer that they think will be satisfying or satisfactory for the American people. But it looks like at least they're on the same page with whatever lie they come up with. This is Pete Hegseth yesterday, as he was getting off the plane and being asked about this, saying basically the same thing that they just said there at the White House. Here it is.
Can you share how your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic, and were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence. We will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly.
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used?
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Okay, and then Caroline Levitt basically said the same thing, but it is, I mean, obviously they were texting war plans, but why are they trying to ruin this reporter's reputation instead of just admitting that they made a mistake?
I mean, it's authoritarian 101. You go after the journalists. So that's what we're seeing here. The thing about Hegseth is I can never tell when he's wasted because the guy's really got a drinking problem, and it's really tough to watch. I'm somebody who has experienced individuals in my life who have had issues with alcohol, and it's very depressing. And watching Hegseth be this kind of hapless drunk while he's doing these things is alarming. And I wish his family well, although I can't say I'm a big fan of the guy. You know, the whole thing where they're talking about how this is similar to Russia, I think that they're making a good point because all the Russia stuff turned out to be true. Trump being a puppet of Putin and Russia interfering in the election, those things all happened. So if they want to say this is like the Russia thing, it's like, okay, thanks for confirming it.
Yeah. So Cam, apparently in an app that's supposedly not hackable, Jeffrey Goldberg was able to do what many people, even foreign governments, apparently aren't able to do. And that is, according to Donald Trump, hack into the group chat. Here it is.
The person that was on just happens to be a sleazebag, so maybe that's just coincidence. I don't know.
But you are conducting
Would it be a
investigation.
problem if
Mr.
the Atlantic
President.
released all the text messages if they're not classified?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to ask the military about that because, you know, maybe you wouldn't want that. I don't know. I will say this, that from what I heard, the man that we're talking about, who's not somebody that I don't think most people have ever heard of, he found it very boring and he left early. He got off the line very early. So I can't speak to it other than that. So he's made up a lot of stories and you know, I think he's basically bad for the country, but it's a failing venture, very failing venture. They're very upset. And a thing like this is publicity for them, but I don't think we should allow people that are very good, like that man sitting right at the end of the table who's done a great job. We shouldn't allow them to be hurt by it.
Yeah, we should, again, sullying the reputation, saying that he was hacked, shouldn't allow it to be heard. I don't even know what to say about this and about just I think the American people, there should be more outrage. And the thing is, if something like this, if there aren't repercussions for something like this, then I don't know where the country is.
Yeah, I think one of the only things that the United States has left at this point, while China's kind of dominating us across the board, is that we do have this sort of extremely violent and powerful military that has so much power around the world, so many allies. And here we are, we're sort of chipping away at all the alliances that we made post-World War II. And we are having our military leaders leak their plans in group chats. So while Trump is doing this authoritarian takeover, you know, to be an authoritarian with enough power, you need a powerful enough military. And it seems like despite his promises to quote unquote restore the military is kind of embarrassing itself more than ever. And we're chipping away at the alliances. So I don't really know what's going on here other than our country, you know, West Russia, just setting ourselves up to be completely decimated by our many growing list of enemies. But Jeffrey Goldberg was clearly telling the truth. The White House is clearly lying, and I can't stress it enough. They're just going to think of some other distracting thing. They're going to say that we're going to annex Mexico or something like that, and everybody's going to stop talking about this giant security issue.
And everyone's going to go with it because they're good at really distracting people, right? Gulf of America and everything. In the meanwhile, they're taking services and possibly Medicaid and Medicare from people and firing them as they are, you know, making a big deal about the Gulf of America, which is really the Gulf of Mexico. Do you think that they're going to try? Obviously, they are. But what lengths do you think they'll go to destroy this reporter's reputation and his livelihood?
I mean, again, targeting journalists, authoritarianism number one. They're removing credentials from people from the White House for questioning the regime at all, and they're filling, you know, the White House reporters with these crazy alt-right pundits. So I don't think there's going to be a limit to how cruelly this administration is going to punish their critics. I think it's going to get worse and worse over time. I think it's going to start to look a little bit more like what Israel does with their journalists or with the journalists in Gaza. And it's really scary and dangerous. And I am very appreciative of people right now who are doing any sort of journalism and speaking out against the regime, because I don't think they're going to start going any easier on the journalists. I think it's going to only get more intense with time.
Well, I'm glad, because I think you're doing that, and I believe that we're doing it as well. So we congratulate you. We're happy to have you here. We're joined today by Cam Kasky, who's a co-host of the Bulwark's FY Pod. He's also helped organize March for Our Lives back in 2018. He's a smart dude, and he's joining us today. So make sure you hit the thumbs up so that people can become aware of our channel. The membership link is at the top of the chat. You can become a member. Also, the subscription button or subscribe button is at the bottom right hand of your screen, just below the Don Lemon logo. So thank you all for your support. We appreciate it. That's how we stay streaming and independent, and we get voices like Cam Kasky on. Okay, so Donald Trump has said, even with all of the mistakes that Doge has made and all of the misinformation that's been out there, Donald Trump is saying, hey, look, they're making a big deal out of this. They want us to fail because we have been perfect. Here it is.
To get on those lines, whether it's signal or anything else. Yeah.
Are you going to change any procedures as a result of this?
Well, I mean, look, we look at everything, and they've made a big deal out of this because we've had 2 perfect months. We are bringing in business. We have another one announced tomorrow, a big one, very big. Like in the history of our country, nobody's ever seen anything like it. And I think probably a lot of people are saying they started by saying it was the greatest first month that a president has ever had, and I think that's true. And now they say it's the best second month, and they had to find something. And this certainly will look at this, but the main thing was nothing happened. The attack was totally successful. It was, I guess, from what I understand, took place during, and it wasn't classified information. So this was not classified. Now, if it's classified information, it's probably a little bit different. But
So, look, as you said, we got a big thing tomorrow. We're going to announce something tomorrow. Is this where the distraction comes in? Does it all start tomorrow?
I don't know. I mean, the distractions are going to continue compounding and getting worse, but there's going to be no accountability. End of story. And the more journalists that investigate and look into the very gross misconduct of the administration are going to be seeing more consequences. I don't believe they're done with Jeffrey Goldberg. I can only assume they're going to target him more aggressively, and we're going to have to see where that goes, but it's not going to be pretty.
Okay, so there was in Washington today, there was a hearing where they discussed this. John Ossoff is grilling the CIA director, Ratcliffe, today. Here it is. Watch.
Ratcliffe, this was a huge mistake, correct?
No.
A national political...
Hold on.
No, you
Let me
hold
answer.
on. No,
The
Director
answer- the
Ratcliffe,
reason
I
I
asked
say
you a yes or
no-
no question, and now you hold on. A national political reporter
You can characterize it how you want.
was made privy
The White
to
House has
sensitive
made
information
clear
about
that there
imminent
was an
military
inadvertent
operations against a
mistake,
foreign terrorist
an inadvertent
organization.
mistake of adding a reporter.
And that wasn't a huge
to a
mistake?
seal.
That wasn't a huge mistake?
Well, I think they characterize
This is
it as
an
a mistake.
embarrassment. This is utterly unprofessional. There's been no apology. There has been no recognition of the gravity of this error. And by the way, we will get the full transcript of this chain, and your testimony will be measured carefully against its content. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you're muted, Don.
He's saying there's no mistake. Basically, they're not admitting to anything. Look, I was around, by the way, Cam, for, believe it or not, for Watergate, and it started like this, but that's not how it ended up.
Yeah, I think that the Atlantic should release the transcript. I don't know why the Atlantic feels as though they have any duty to the United States of America to hold on to this transcript. They have a duty to the people to release it. I think we should hear what they have to say.
I think that, well, maybe you think they should release the full thing, or should they redact it in order to protect people? Because apparently there was someone who is somewhat of a covert kind of agent or type on there that, people would not want the identity of this person being known.
Sure,
Should they release it and be redacted? Do you think that the American people deserves that? Or maybe they deserve that? Or you think maybe they're, trying to uphold at least some journalistic standard? I'm with you, but I'm sure there are others who feel the other way.
Well, I don't think anybody ought to get doxxed. I don't think we should be revealing secret locations of operatives who could be put in danger. But at the end of the day, there's, while we talk about journalistic integrity, there's also a responsibility with the freedom of the press to use that freedom. And if the United States is going to make a grievous error like that and then go so far as to gaslight everybody into thinking that either it didn't happen or Goldberg hacked his way into it. I don't really know which message they're actually running with right now. But if the administration is going to do this, okay, show us the receipts. If they are going to be that sloppy, let them pay the price. Don't let them get away with it.
Yeah. Andy, I think we have another John Ossoff clip, right? With Radcliffe?
Yep.
Let's do it.
Radcliffe, you were a member of the Houthi PC small group signal chain, correct?
I was.
Yeah, and so were the Vice President, the Secretaries of State and Defense, the National Security Advisor, and Ms. Gabbard, correct?
I believe so. I don't have a list of who was invited to be on.
And so was national political reporter Jeffrey Goldberg, correct?
I don't know that.
Yes, you do.
I don't know Jeffrey Goldberg, and I've already testified. I don't know whether or how he was added.
Okay, well, he was a member of the signal chain, and the discussion included the Vice President's private opinion on the wisdom of proposed U.S. strikes in Yemen, correct?
I don't recall.
Vance, quote, I think we are making a mistake. I am not sure the president is aware of how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There was a strong argument for delaying this a month. You don't recall?
I don't. As you
don't recall seeing that?
Read that? I don't.
It included the private opinions of the Secretary of Defense on the timing of strikes in Yemen, correct?
I don't recall.
Director Radcliffe, surely you prepared for this hearing today. You were part of a group of principals, senior echelons of the U.S. government, in now a widely publicized breach of sensitive information. You don't recall whether the Vice President opined on the wisdom of the strikes? That's your testimony today under oath?
In that setting, I don't recall.
Here's what Secretary Hegseth said, quote, waiting a few weeks or months does not fundamentally change the calculus. Two immediate risks on waiting. One, this leaks and we look indecisive. Two, Israel takes an action first or Gaza ceasefire falls apart and we don't get to start this on our own terms. Your testimony is you don't recall the Secretary of Defense sending that message or reading it?
I recall there being an exchange. I don't recall the specifics as you're reading it.
Okay, here's the thing. They're caught in, it is a catch-22, so to speak. They can't admit to the things here, right? That it was a mistake or what was said on whether it was classified or top secret or whatever it is. And then it makes them look like idiots if they say, I don't recall. But when the transcript, at least for what we see, is actually right there. And this whole I don't recall thing is not playing very well for them at this point.
First of all, I'm sorry. One thing I can't overlook from that conversation is Secretary of whatever saying that this might get in the way of the ceasefire in Gaza. There hasn't been one. Right after the supposed ceasefire deal happened, Israel kept going. And now they are going very hard. Like there wasn't much of a ceasefire. There was talk of a ceasefire. People were saying there was a ceasefire, but Israel doesn't really cease the fire. And it's only going to be getting worse with time. So that's ridiculous. As for the other stuff, they're lying. They're gaslighting everybody. It's really that simple. And they get away with it. They've been getting away with it the whole time.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I don't want to sit here. I'm getting your analysis, and I don't want to bring you into my drama where I'm just going to fucking slam them after you leave because I don't know how deeply you want to get into this. But I'm not going to normalize. You're right. This is bullshit. And so, and for him to sit there, that is a rote answer. I don't recall that attorneys give you, right? Advisors give you when you don't want to get your ass in a sling. You just say, I don't recall, so that you don't prejudice yourself at least. So incriminate yourself. I want to play this. This is Mark Kelly grilling Tulsi Gabbard because she's having some issues, fessing up to what happened. Here it is.
In the signal chain that we have been talking about, was there any mention of a target in Yemen?
I don't remember mention of specific targets.
Any generic target?
I believe there was discussion around targets in general.
Mr. Ratcliffe.
I think that's consistent with my recollection. Again, I don't have access to that. But
Was there any mention, Ms. Gabbard, of a weapon or weapons system?
I don't recall specific weapons systems being named.
I'm not talking about specific, any weapon or weapons system.
I don't recall specific names of systems or weapons being used.
This is really shades of Watergate, and they have to be very careful about what they say on the record, again, because they can admit and incriminate themselves into, up to prison, which I don't think the president will allow, but they've got to be very careful. One more thing, and then I'll get your response. Here's Angus King grilling Tulsi Gabbard again about similar things. Here it is.
Director Gabbard, I didn't intend to get into the Jeffrey Goldberg story, but something you said has sort of puzzled me. According to open source reporting at 11:44 on the morning of March 15th, Secretary Hegseth put into this group text a detailed operation plan, including targets, the weapons we were going to be using, attack sequences, and timing. And yet you've testified that nothing in that chain was classified. Wouldn't that be classified? What if that had been made public that morning before the attack took place?
Senator, I can attest to the fact that there were no classified or intelligence equities that were included in that chat group at any time.
So,
and I
so
defer,
the attack sequencing and timing and weapons and targets you don't consider should have been classified?
I defer
were
to the
classified?
Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council on that question.
Well, you're the head of you're the head of the intelligence community, and you're supposed to know about classifications. So your testimony very clearly today is that nothing was in that set of texts that were classified. I'll follow up on Senator Wyden's question. If that's the case, please release that whole text stream so that the public can have a view of what actually transpired on this discussion. It's hard for me to believe that targets and timing and weapons would not have been classified. Well, let me move on.
What do you make? Again, they can't say it. They're afraid to say it. And I think this is only the beginning. And the reason I think that this is, and as I spoke to my producers, the reason, Cam, I think this one is sticky and it's different is that it is easy to digest. It's not so complicated that they should not be using this encrypted platform, that you have to be invited on and accepted. And then everybody is on there. This is an easy one to digest, even for the American people. But again, they've got to be careful on what they say.
I mean, even Tommy Lahren called this out. Tommy Lahren, broken clock, which really goes to show how much energy this might cultivate in regards to pointing out how sloppy all of this has been, because this has been sloppy. The stuff with the DOGE, I mean, remember that story? There's too many stories from the DOGE. That's how they're able to operate the way they have been able to, is create too many disasters that it's hard to track them and it's hard to call them out on it, because every time there's a new disaster, there's another one right afterwards to point out. But the DOGE sent 2 kids, probably around my age, over to California to unleash more water while they were trying to fight the fires, because the messaging during the LA fires was that we need to get more water flowing to stop the fires. So they sent a couple kids to do it. They didn't have the clearance to do it. They didn't do it. And then the DOGE touted it as a huge success. And the reason I bring this story up is it just speaks to how sloppy and messy these people are. They are not being competent fascists. They are being incompetent fascists. And that makes it even more embarrassing that we are being run by fascists right now. So I don't know how much more I have to say about this other than it is something that under any normal administration, people would get sent to prison for. And it's something that is going to force this administration to just turn up the gas on their gaslight and divert. And I am truly afraid of how dangerous their next charade might be in order to distract from what's going on right now. Who knows which people they're going to throw in prison, which countries they're going to claim they're going to annex. It's a real nightmare.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because a couple of things. You mentioned Tommy Lahren and you mentioned young men, right? Young people. Let's talk about young men with you because I know that you're trying to help out with the youth. And I think that is really, really important, especially considering, Cam, the influence that young people had in the election and helping Donald Trump go, win the White House once again. Let's talk about young men. Because as I made my way around the country before the election, I noticed that a lot of young men, a lot of Trump, especially from young men and what they call, I guess it's the sort of the bro sphere. How does all of this going to play out? I believe you can and moving forward, when you have sort of scandals like this, does this matter, with the young folks as to, if they're going to continue to support Donald Trump and the administration?
I know some young people who have, if not supportive, have been definitely a little lenient with the Trump administration because the Trump administration is doing the types of things they want to see on Israel and, fighting woke and all these other things. Young men who claim that they're not partisan MAGA types, but then go ahead and say, oh, but I kind of like it when Trump does this. And that's sort of the pipeline you see is young men engaging with content that isn't straight up partisan politics, but has the energy of MAGA, has the cultural resonance of MAGA. When they're watching Jake and Logan Paul, when they are watching the Hawk Tuah podcast, and you see the young woman from that was just seen with Michael Knowles, a far-right influencer. When you enter this sphere, the types of people who are going on these giant podcast platforms and telling young men that the things we're missing in life are because of woke and equity and DEI, you start to see young men fall down this pipeline where accessible content brings them to people like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, and Jordan Peterson, who are going to radicalize them. So what I think is happening is the right has successfully taken over the narrative and said to young men, particularly young white men, but young men across the board, all of these steps forward that we are taking to make this a more equitable country for women, people of color, all these things are happening at your expense. The steps forward we take for women, it's not just that they're for women, they're against you. And a lot of the issues that young men are seeing and being driven rightwards for are intersectional issues that affect everybody. Income inequality is the biggest problem my generation sees right now. Income inequality is only getting worse. My generation we're not walking into a good job market unless you're talking about driving delivery for Uber Eats or working in an Amazon indentured servitude. Like, we're not getting jobs. We are not going to be able to buy houses. Things don't look good for us. And the left has been so afraid to reach out to men because, we don't want to look misogynist. We don't want to look like we're leaving women behind. So we're getting lost in these identity politics, and in doing so, not putting the effort and energy into reaching out to young men. I mean, Harris and Walz didn't go to colleges while they were campaigning. It was insane. The left isn't reaching out to young men because they don't want to look like they're, aligning with the manosphere in any way. So young men feel left behind. They feel like the Democratic Party doesn't have room for young white boys like us because the Democratic Party is rightfully focusing energy on building opportunities for new people. And it's very frustrating. And I think what we need to see from the Democratic Party is an effort to communicate to these young men that the issues that are actually making your life worse, like income inequality, those are intersectional and those are issues that the left is tackling better than the right. And that's why Bernie Sanders and AOC are more popular than they've ever been. That's why Bernie and AOC are able to engage audiences that otherwise would vote on the right. It's because they're calling out the oligarchs and the billionaires that are screwing everybody over. And young people, that's resonating with us. The center of the Democratic Party is so trepidatious about calling out the oligarchy because at the end of the day, the oligarchy is the people who's writing them all their campaign checks. So they won't call it like it is. And young men are seeing the center left focus everything on identity politics because they're not focused on income inequality. Mm-hmm. And we feel left out. So when Joe Rogan and all these other guys tell us that wokeness and DEI are why we can't get a girlfriend, why we aren't getting laid, why we aren't getting jobs, young men are keen to believe it because finally somebody is reaching out to us.
Yeah, the Charlie Kirks of the world. I'm glad you mentioned that. Charlie Kirks, and as you said, the Joe Rogan and on and on. So then that's a tricky thing. So then how does a Democratic Party do that? You answered a lot of my questions. I was going to ask you about AOC and Bernie Sanders, but how then does because that's a tightrope that they're walking. How do they convince, young men that they care about them and then also satisfy the other coalitions in their party?
Young men, young women, people of color, white people, everybody is going to be struggling from income inequality, especially with Peter Thiel's techno-feudalist cabal calling the shots, because Trump's not the mastermind right now. Trump is not the man pulling the strings. Putin and Peter Thiel and Benjamin Netanyahu are calling the shots, mostly Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel installed his own vice president, his scion, J.D. Vance, and they are making sure the economy tanks as aggressively as possible so the billionaires can seize more power than they've ever had. And I think there are two primary things keeping young people away from protesting right now the way we saw them protest the war in Gaza last year. Number one, protesters are not safe in this country. Mahmoud Khalil got disappeared. A young woman at Columbia is facing fears of deportation right now. Who knows when the next Kent state is going to happen? All we know is that if anybody's going to do it, it's Donald Trump. Number two, there are too many crises right now to be protesting. What if you're going to take to the streets, if you're going to go out and, fight against this administration, what do you put on your protest sign? There's too many things going on right now. What Bernie and AOC have done is they've found a rallying call that can make it onto your poster and that everybody can get behind no matter their political party, which is fight oligarchy. That's what this is all about. Fight oligarchy.
But why is there such hesitation among Democrats? Because when I bring it up, they're like, you're crazy. They're too far this, they're too far that. And almost to a person, when I go out and I speak to people, they say, I like Bernie, I like AOC. I don't necessarily agree with their policies, all of their policies. And I'm like, well, of course you don't. Now, they won't say that about someone that they would consider maybe a more mainstream candidate. They don't bring up the I don't agree with their policies thing. And I was watching, there was a panel that I had on last night. That I was watching last night on YouTube, and they said, well, the first question that Bernie and AOC would be, pushed out of the ranking, pushed out of the race for if they decided to have a ticket in 2028, which is a whole other thing. All someone would have to ask them, speaking of your manosphere to the right thing, is what is a woman? And then no one in the country would vote for them. That's what they're saying. What do you think of that?
I think that we need to not be throwing trans people under the bus, because that is just weakness and it is obviously capitulating to the Republican Party and their culture wars. I think my response to what is a woman, my personal response is a woman is someone who says they're a woman. That's my take. But in terms of how to reach voters about the trans issues, you tell them you're getting played for a fool, because while the crypto fascists are coming after your money, while they're trying to tank the economy and make it so everybody is taking out loans to order Uber Eats and living in long-term Airbnbs that are charging them twice what they ought to be, while the billionaires are laughing at us for our culture wars, we are all suffering. Everything is going to get significantly worse. And if trans is an issue for you, you need to look at your life and say, is this really what affects me on the day-to-day? Because most of the folks who complain about trans and think that trans has gone too far, I've never met a trans person. And that's one of the things I say to them is like, has a trans person ever impacted your life at all? All we know is that attacks on vulnerable communities like that are what the fascists do, right? You look at the Weimar era, you look at cultural Bolshevism, right? Where the Nazi party was using social progression as a tool to end up creating concentration camps. And when you look up cultural Bolshevism, one of the first things you see is them talking about cultural Marxism. And cultural Marxism is something that Charlie Kirk and the right say all the time. They are pulling from the Nazi playbook. And here you are freaking out about trans people. Here's the answer to what is a woman. You shouldn't care, okay? It's none of your business. You ought to focus on the people who are actually screwing you over, because I promise you the 0.00001% of people in this world who are trans are not why you can't get a job right now. They're not why you're going bankrupt for your healthcare. They are just trying to exist, and the billionaires are fucking laughing at you for thinking that trans people have any impact on your day-to-day life.
I want to ask you about this. Speaking of young people and influencers, right? We've been talking a lot about influencers on the right. Let's talk about influencers on the left, and whatever you can offer to this story to get people to understand what is going on. Democratic influencer Harry Sisson has been under attack for allegedly manipulating and luring numerous women to share their explicit videos. Blah 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 blah. He's involved in a scandal. And he's a social media platform. What do you make of this? And to me, it's interesting when they have who they have in office as president of the United States, but for some reason on the right, this is a huge deal to them.
I mean, my biggest problem with Harry Sisson is that he was shilling for Biden long after people like me were saying, you know what, Biden, maybe your brain isn't working fast enough to be president. But I think that the Harry Sisson drama points to a larger issue in the Democratic Party, which is that while we should be doing everything we can to stand up and rally against fascism, we are out here trying to do a humiliation tour for this little dweeb who was a jerk to a bunch of young women who he totally manipulated and lied to and used and exploited in a way where I don't feel bad for him that he's had this comeuppance. He fucked around and he found out, and it is what it is. But the right is sending immigrants into basically concentration camps. People are being disappeared for exercising their First Amendment rights. Everything is so terrible right now that I say to people on the left while we're talking about Sisson, and mind you, I'm guilty of this too, because we did a whole segment on my podcast about it, but that's because my podcast tries to be funny, and this is a hilarious situation, is if you're going to be espousing left-wing views, especially to young people, right, we need to support that. And Harry Sisson, again, he fucked around and he found out, and he did the wrong thing and he paid the price for it. But if we are spending our time and energy, punishing this kid for being a jerk, if Harry Sisson was on the right, if he was a right-wing influencer and this stuff came out about him, everybody on the right would be like, my man, player right here. Hell yeah. So I'm like, we've got a trillion problems right now. We don't need to worry about Harry Sisson.
Well, he'd be on the road to become the defense secretary, or even bigger, he would be on the road to become the president of the United States.
Didn't Charlie Kirk just get appointed to some position somewhere?
I don't know. Did he? I have no idea.
I don't care.
Cam, you're the best. I don't know what the truth is about Harry. I can't say that I'm wild about Harry because I don't really know him. And I'm not going to, bash him or whatever. I don't really know him. But from what I see, I like him. I think he's like this sort of cute, dweeby young kid who is making his way and has become a successful influencer. Let's not forget, he is an influencer. I don't know if he considers himself, I don't consider him to be a journalist, so to speak, but he is a very powerful, I believe, influencer on the left. And I think the right, the hypocrisy of the right to try to call him out when you look at the people who are in power in their party, is just, for me, a bridge too far.
Listen, the last thing I'll say to this is this situation would not be nearly as funny if he didn't have that shit-eating grin that he always uses. I think the shit-eating grin is why this situation is funny, because there's nothing funny about lying to and manipulating young women into thinking that they are the only person you're engaging with and using that manipulation to get illicit images from them. That is not something that is acceptable. But I mean, when you put the picture of him up there, I mean, it's just so funny, this cartoonish shit-eating grin that looks like, the villain in a children's animated movie. It's kind of funny. But other than that, we should probably figure out what they're going to do to Mahmoud Khalil. That's one of my primary concerns right now.
I agree with you. So Cam Kasky, the co-host of the Bulwark's FY podcast, also helped organize the March for Our Lives back in 2018, and a very bright young man who we'd love to have back. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great
day.
Say
everything you wanted to say today, because we would love to have you back. Are you good?
Oh, we'll chat again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you, Cam. Be well.
Take care.
Okay, so now let me go and just real quickly, I just want to check with something because I think I got to deal with something. Okay, so here's the thing, everyone. These people are fucking lying and they're bullshitters and they know that they're bullshitting you. And they know that they were caught with their ass in a sling. They were caught with their hands in the cookie jar and their asses in a sling now. And I know that's a lot of cliches, but it is the truth. And so all of these hearings that you're seeing and people asking these questions as if it is normal, this is not normal. And they know that they're caught. They're being very, very careful about what they have to say because they don't want to go to prison. And they know that they could actually go to prison. I just want to play a couple of things for you so that you can understand the severity of this, okay? And so, well, actually not the severity of it. Yeah, the severity and how it's being played really on cable television. But first of all, this is Jared Moskowitz, who is, he's in a House hearing, and he's sort of mocking what these folks are doing and just showing you the absurdity of all of this as people are buying into it. And there are people really who are buying into it, and they think like, hey, the Trump administration, they're playing, 3 or 4 dimensional chess, and we, the people, the folks in the media out here, independent media or corporate media, we are just too dumb. The American people, we just don't get it. But first, here's Jared Moskowitz in a House hearing today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's always good, like when we have something that's bipartisan, to point it out, because it happens so little around here anymore. But rather than giving like a really big, long speech, I feel like I could just use this, and this will tell you that I think it's good, right? So like that's a fist, American flag, fire. So I'll just, from now on, when we do things where like we agree, I'll just hold this up rather than giving like a really big, long speech. So job well done, guys.
Would the gentleman yield?
Sure, I'll yield.
But I'm not sure everybody recognizes the reference there. Would you explain where that comes from?
Yeah, so this is how when we're in like a chat with friends, right, where we're like having a casual chat about like where we're dropping missiles.
Are you talking about a public chat room?
Yeah, but like, and with friends, and we're just like, hamming about who we're gonna bomb and all of that. But we agree, we fist American flag fire. So I'm holding this up. I think we could just keep the committee shorter if like when we agree, we just hold this up.
No, I think you're supposed to have the flexed arm instead of the fist.
No, it was just, it was just the fist. What signal chat are you in?
But
I was on Twitter.
If the gentleman would yield for an additional question,
Sure.
But what happens if there are reporters who might be there for that?
Well, hopefully they support America and that it's fire.
So you're telling me we can't have a bipartisan conversation among members of the committee without a journalist being there?
Well, we can, but if you don't add them, if you don't want them to know.
And what if they just happen to show up somehow?
Well, that's because somebody added them.
Look, I think it just shows the ridiculousness of this and the lies that they are telling as it relates to what's going on, what they did, what they know they did, and then what they know that they are guilty of. Now, again, this is an idiot MAGA influencer insisting that the Trump team is playing 4D chess. That's why it's important for me to play something like that of Jared Moskowitz, just to show how ridiculous and how stupid these people are. Here it is. Watch this guy. You're not going to believe it.
If you really believe for 1 second that Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, J.D. Vance, and Pete Hegseth just accidentally let a journalist from The Atlantic into their group chat on Signal discussing war plans, then there's a word for you. That word starts with an R and ends with E-T-A-R-D, retard. Because there is no world. I do Signal chats, I do Telegram chats, I do group chats all the time. You don't randomly add Atlantic journalists and then continue the conversation. Because these Signal chats, a lot of the times, they don't even update. You don't get to add them and see all the stuff before. So they had to add him, and then they had to start talking. Please. This is called leaking to the press without leaking to the press. This is how you do it. This is how it's done. The Trump camp has been famous for this for years. Remember the stories about Trump being his own publicist in the 80s and calling up the magazines and leaking information about himself that he wanted out there? This is the modern day version of that. If you think for 1 second Pete Hegseth or J.D., these are the top people of the country. These are the most intelligent and capable human beings that are in the government. If you think for 1 second they'd be having these chats over Signal and then be stupid enough to accidentally let a opposition journalist into the chat. Man, you really fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. You probably also believe that all the stuff you hear in the news about Trump is real. And you probably believe the suckers and losers hoax, the very fine people hoax. There's a lot of stuff you believe. Let me tell you, this is called misdirection, and this is called strategy. If you really believe this, I don't even know. I got a bridge to sell you in Utah or somewhere, but you are some silly, silly people.
Yeah. You know, if you believe that, what he's saying, then you are really an idiot. If you believe that, because none of it is true. And even if let's just say that they were doing it, guess what, MAGA influencer idiot? It is still illegal. It is still unethical. They still should not be doing it. So it doesn't matter whether they're playing 4D chess or 3D chess or whatever it is that you're saying, they're not supposed to do it. They're not supposed to be using a signal platform, an encrypted platform. From the onset, from the outset, from the very beginning, are you that stupid that you don't understand that? So you will come up, this is the thing that I tell you about MAGA brain people. They will come up with any excuse in the world, however they have to twist themselves, to reconcile anything that Donald Trump does, to give some credence, to say that, okay, it's okay. He's right. Anything. They will just anything. It is unfreaking believable that they will do it. Tim Miller over at the Bulwark discussing this. Oh, is this Tim Miller? Who's he discussing here? Oh, he's with Jeffrey Goldberg, correct? Is that what I have?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Let's listen real quick, and then I'm going to get the media, and then we're going to do something else.
Covert CIA operative named on the thread, right? So I mean,
well, yes, and I withheld her name from this. They named somebody who's an active CIA officer in this thread, which is on Signal, again, a commercial app in which I'm watching. You know, and I withheld it. I didn't put it in the story because she's undercover. But I mean, the CIA director put it into the chat.
The CIA, and so that shows you just the MAGA influencer there, just how silly it is, because again, there is a CIA undercover agent allegedly in that chat. So again, from the onset, what they're doing is illegal, and they should not be doing it. Okay, let me show you what's happening over, and I showed you a little bit this morning in our 10 o'clock live about how the right-wing media is handling this. They're trying to legitimize everything that has happened. Here is Jim Himes, Representative Jim Himes, on Will Kane's show over on the Fox News. Here it is.
That was not a serious mistake, putting American lives into jeopardy, and I think that your side is doing this to score political points, the first political points they've been able to accomplish in 2 months.
Well, what we're talking about here, and I've spent a decade now watching how our intelligence community communicates with the warfighter. So I am not going to listen to you tell me that this is about a partisan advantage. It is a mistake, and yes, it's a very serious mistake. Because if you make a mistake in Social Security and grandma doesn't get a phone call through, that's bad. But there is not zero risk that our young men and women in uniform, the ones who flew those F-35s and F-18s,
Congressman, how was an American life put into jeopardy?
We will find out.
Congressman, how? Fine, you've made a claim. Tell me how an American life was put into jeopardy.
Because in an insecure channel, in what was acknowledged as a mistake before, whether it was a day or 2 hours or 5 hours, in a signal chat that we know. Do you want an answer to your question? In a signal chat that we know that the Russians could intercept, they might have told the Houthis in an hour. And in half an hour, they're moving their anti-aircraft stuff around. It is by the grace of God that we don't have dead pilots or sunken ships right now. And I will tell you, whether it's a big mistake or a small mistake, to then go and attack Jeffrey Goldberg, without whom we wouldn't even know about this mistake, it's got to make
including Jeffrey Goldberg was the mistake. Including Jeffrey Goldberg was the mistake.
And talk to get any military officer on your show right now, Will. Get any military officer serving right now, any intelligence officer, and they will tell you that Jeffrey Goldberg was the cherry on top of using an insecure channel in advance to discuss military plans.
I'm not going to argue, Congressman. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue that no mistake was made. And I'm not going to argue that Signal is the perfectly appropriate app to have this conversation. What I am going to argue with you is that you are hyperbolically taking this over the top, yes, absolutely, for partisan points, in order to score in the first time in 2 months. Don't do it on Signal. I agree. Don't do it on Signal.
Well,
but nobody's live.
You know what? Here's the
CIA
thing.
director.
You are the one who is making this into a partisan issue. And we are talking about the lives of our young men and women. And it makes me want to throw up to hear you turn this into a partisan issue when we are talking about the lives of our airmen and Marines and sailors. You just need to stop this. You cannot run a segment cheering Medal of Honor winners, many of whom win posthumously, and tell me that this mistake is about partisan advantage.
It is. And I can run that segment, and I'm doing it with you right now, and I'll tell you something else. This isn't an administration that watched as 13 Marines died or spilled secrets to the Chinese Communist Party or did any of the other things that we just watched. It's hard to take you seriously, or that Jeffrey Goldberg is the hero in this story, when what you're positing is a hypothetical. And
I'm sorry, guys. You had to see that, especially that last part. I hope I didn't make you dumber with that. Again, that is some ridiculousness. And I'm glad that Jim Himes stood up to him. And Jim Himes is exactly 100% correct. This is not a partisan issue. And imagine if this was on the other side. You don't really have to imagine it. All you have to do is look at her emails. Russia, Russia, Russia. Look at her emails and see what happens. They're always talking about Russia, Russia, Russia. It was nothing. And then they're like, oh, look at her emails. Look at what you Democrats are doing. You're trying to catch Trump in a lie. And so we're going to, pretend that Russia was nothing. And then we're going to go to Hillary Clinton's apparently having a server. We don't have to imagine. We know what you would be doing if it was the other side. We know what you would be doing. It would be partisan here. So look, guys, look, I don't really know what to tell you, except that what I will tell you is that we're not done. This isn't over. I think this is going to get even bigger. I think this is going to be a bigger scandal. I think, look, in any other time, this would be akin to Watergate. But we have an administration that really does not play by the rules. They always, circle the wagons and they protect themselves. They have a huge influence on the Supreme Court, a huge influence on the legislative branch. Republicans are never going to probably agree that any of these people face any real repercussions or ramifications for this. And it's sad. Are we in a dictatorship right now? I believe it. Are we in a constitutional crisis? I believe it. But this could change. This could be the turning point. And I think it should be the turning point for the American people and the turning point really for MAGA to realize that this administration has gone too far with this authoritarian attitude and actions. It's way too much. It's way too much. And the lying has to stop. They should just admit they made a mistake now and stop it, right? Because it's usually not the actions. It's the cover-up. And right now it looks like a cover-up. And they're not doing a very good job of covering it up, of hiding it. So I appreciate you joining us today. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on your way out. Make sure you like and subscribe. We really appreciate you being here. We get to stay on the air or streaming because of your generosity. And again, thank you so much for all of your support. And I'm glad that you're here. And I will see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time, bright and early. Before that, make sure you check out 8 o'clock. We're going to have something. We'll be back with you at 8 o'clock for something. So make sure, I think it's going to redirect from here. But we will see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. In the meantime, you guys know what I say every single time. And I've seen some folks say it already in the chat. Turn this TV off. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never, ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate